creating figures. And this is where Excel comes into play, right? You use Excel to organize your data, your numbers, your metrics, and then you create some nice graphics on Excel, and then you copy paste those graphics into PowerPoint, right? So that's how the data portion. And I know none of you, I'm guessing many of you have not started your data portion of your poster because you don't have any preliminary data yet, probably. So this is, again, very basic introduction level. Some of your data sets are really complex, and you're going to have to rely on your graduate student or your daily lab supervisor to help you to organize your data. And they likely already have a method and an Excel template, to process the data that you're collecting. So, again, rely on your lab for the expertise. I'm going to show you some very basic dummy data. So this is a simple time in seconds versus distance in meters, right? So kind of a physics problem type question where you collect some data. So the first thing you do is you get your data table and you import it into Excel, right? So this is what Excel would look like. You put in your time, you put in your distance, right? You have your data table with your data inputs. And then what you do is you go here to your scatter line plot. So this is going to be a very basic, simple line plot that we're going to do. Obviously, there are a bunch of other different ways to display data. So you see these images here, right? These are plots like showing like kind of frequency. You have some bar charts, you have pie charts, you have stacked bar charts. You have pivot charts when you have pivot tables. That's what I asked on, for the 5, those of you who've had big data. So whenever you have a ton of data, you probably have to do pivot tables. And so there's pivot charts here that you can use. All of these buttons you're going to want to test out. So again, it's like I'm just showing you the toy, all the toys available, all the tools available in the toy box. And then you're going to have to start clicking and testing and just trying out different stuff. And of course, rely on your expertise of your lab. Say, in the past, how has the lab displayed this data set? And they'll give you some very basic templates that they've done in the past. Hopefully, you're not in a unique situation where the data you're collecting has never been collected before by the lab. Because then they'll be like, we never collect this data. We don't know how to display it yet. And in that case, you're going to have to work with your graduate student to figure out what is the best way to showcase your data. So again, these are all the buttons that you're going to have to test and play with to figure out what is the best, most unique, best representation of your data. Okay, so to be professional, here is how, if you click that button, this is what that button will spit out, right? It'll spit out a couple dots saying, okay, at 0 time, there was 0 distance. There's dot number 1. And then there's data point number 2, right? 5 seconds, 10 meters, that's the second data point and the third data point. So this is what it spits out. You probably did something like this for your physics lab report if you've taken a physics lab, or your chem lab if you did, freshman chemistry. If you haven't, then you will be doing this for your data reports, your lab reports. Now, to be professional for these scientific posters, we have some tips. You should first remove the grid lines. You probably don't need the grid lines. That's just going to make your poster look kind of funky. So you want to eliminate those. You also, in general, want to remove the title, and I'll tell you why in a couple of slides. You also need to add some very important things, some components. You have to add the axes, titles with units. That is critical, right? We need to know what these numbers mean. You need to label that. And again, your experiments, your projects have some very funky, weird data collection methods that have different weird units that you have to explain. You want to add some tick marks, and you want to add some color in general, right? You don't want just a black and white, graph like this or visual. And then you absolutely have to have captions, and those captions have to be consistent. So let me break that down and show you how to do that. So to remove the grid lines is pretty easy. You click on the grid line itself, and then you usually right click, or you have a little drop down menu that says delete. And it's pretty simple. You can remove the horizontal and the vertical lines. Again, you just have to kind of highlight it on the graph, and then your little menu bar comes down, drops down, and then you can delete. For the title, you just click on the title, and again, you should be able to just click delete, right? It should be you could say, edit the title, rename the title. You can change the font on the title. You can change the color of the title. Again, these are all drop-down functions on Excel. You just have to kind of hover over it, click on it, and then all the options will come up. So delete is one of them. You might be asking, well, why would I delete the title of my figure of my graph? You need that. The reason is because those titles are on a scientific poster. They need to go into the caption. So let me talk a little bit about the captions in the next slide. So back to the axes, right? So how do we change the title? So you click on the axes. There's the bar here, the drop-down menu. There's axes, axes title, chart title, data labels. Again, these are all the drop-down. There's an error bar. There's the grid lines I talked about, and a legend. So if you have a lot of color going on and a lot of different bars or different, different color, you want to use a legend. So there's a legend here. And if there's a trend line that you want to highlight, use trend line. So again, these are all the options. You're just going to click and play and learn as you go. There's also some chart design, as you see here. There's like different color schemes you can use. Again, there are the different types of charts that you can use. So again, you just click and play. I'm just showing you one sample here. It's, again, a very basic low-level introduction. So, so you simply click on the figure, chart design, and then you go to titles, and then you add the titles. You can add titles for horizontal, right, for that axis, and then for your vertical axis. So that's, I think, pretty straightforward. Adding tick marks or deleting tick marks. So again, you go into format axes, you have axes options. And in your axes options, here's the table. You can go format axes, right? So you click on it, you then go to format axes, and then this pops up, right? So it's kind of like step 1, step 2, and then step 3. And in the format axes, you can see there's a lot of things you can change. You can change the color. You can change the tick marks. You can, change the units, right? To make it, look how you want it to look. You can change the labels. This is very, very important. You need to include the units. You need to label the units, right? We need to know 10 what? Is this 10 microseconds? Is this 10 milliseconds? Is this 10, whatever, kilometers or meters or whatever. So, and then there's text options is another button here you can click on. So again, don't forget your unit labels. You will definitely lose points on your poster if you don't have properly labeled units. And that also goes for your presentation, your oral technical presentation that you're going to do once you get results. So here's the version of the figure. So we've added our label here. We've added our units. We added our tick marks. We've eliminated the grids. And then once you have this, you can copy paste it into your poster. Another thing you can see is you can increase the bullet size of the tick marks. You can also increase the labels here on your axes, and you can increase the font size and the color. I mean, you can totally get creative with this. We recommend you use Arial, and that's what's typically used in papers, in formal research papers and scientific journals, because it's clean, it's neat, and you can bold it if necessary for better, for it to better visually be represented. Captions, I mentioned this earlier. It is critical for every single figure on your poster to have a caption. So you need to have a caption, and there's different ways you can format it. We don't really care which format you use. Sometimes you want to ask your lab. Sometimes they are very critical, and your lab says, this is exactly how we want you to do your poster. This is our template for the entire lab. This is how the whole lab, everybody in the lab does posters, and you have to follow what they tell you. Other labs could care less. They don't care. do it however you want. Whatever you choose to do, just be consistent. So if you choose to use this first method where you have figure 1 period, then you have the title of the figure, distance versus time plot, and then you have a description of the figure, right? So if you use that for your first figure, then you better use the same consistent method for figure 2 and figure 3 and figure 4. You don't want to change from method 1 to method 4 down here where you now do an abbreviated fig.1 and then distance versus time plot and then a period. So, you know, if you're bolding the title, then bold the title in every caption. So don't skip, you know, don't change back and forth between figures. All the figures should have a consistent way of doing it. So I think that covers it. Are there any questions about creating figures using PowerPoint to create figures for your data and how to visually present your data? Nope. All right, cool. So I know that was helpful for the 1s and 2s. If you rated yourself as a 3, 4 Excel expert, I hope that wasn't too basic and I hope I didn't waste your time.